Hi, in this video I'm going to cover how traffic sources work. So, traffic sources are just a categorization of where your traffic is coming from, as well as defining parameters that you want to save for that incoming traffic, and how you might pass conversion data back to that traffic source. So, when you click New to create a traffic source, you'll be presented with this dialog. You can type in the name of traffic sources and select from our templates if you want, or you can just put whatever name you feel like and continue from there. When you select a template, it'll automatically populate this tracking field section and possibly or optionally this conversion tracking section if that's part of our template. So let me just go through what all of these parts mean. So name is pretty self-explanatory. Let's just put test traffic source. Category, again, relatively straightforward. You don't have to choose one. Cost type is how you expect cost to work for this traffic source. There's two options: cost per entrance, which is a cost associated with every visitor, and cost per acquisition, which is where you get charged a cost by the traffic source only when someone converts. This is more common with app install type traffic sources, so for 99% of cases you'll be using CPE. Now when you put a default cost here, for example 0.005, all that will happen is that when you generate a link for this traffic source, we'll add a parameter C equals 0.05 to the URL. It's completely optional if you actually want to put this in your URL data, but that's the easiest way to pass a cost value. If your traffic source supports passing cost dynamically, you could put a token here like cost, but this is not so common on most traffic sources that charge on a CPM basis, but you will find this with pop-up style traffic sources relatively readily. Now, with tracking fields, we have a few global or reserved fields here, and then you can add your own custom fields. Now, the campaign field is one we reserve for passing campaign IDs. So with most traffic sources, you'll be able to dynamically pass campaign ID with something like campaign.id or whatever token that system might have made available. Would recommend always filling this out because we use it within our reporting for the campaign attribute. External is reserved for external tracking IDs or click IDs that a traffic source may pass to our system, which will ultimately need to pass back to them when conversions happen. So you might have something like click ID. Now the values in these fields should be the tokens or macros that your traffic source uses. So their system will be the one that defines what these are. Here we're just configuring the placeholders that we will put in the URL, which we're going to eventually put into their system. These tokens here, on the other hand, are the FunnelFlux tokens and are what you can use within our system to refer to this data. So for a lander URL or an offer URL, for example, if you use this campaign token, for any specific user, we will pass onward whatever value we stored under this campaign field from the traffic source. These unlock buttons allow you to rename these as an alias. You will very rarely use these. The main time you will use them is something like Facebook, where they forcefully add something like FB CLID. And here you can just rename it and put nothing here, and will automatically capture these values that Facebook sends, but it's kind of a fringe scenario. Now, as for adding custom fields, these are up to you, but you can pass parameters from the traffic source, such as zone ID, maybe creative ID, something like publisher ID, it's up to you. And you might have tokens here like zone, or creative, or publisher. It completely depends on that system. Any of this data that you pass to our system, you can then pass onward to other things later using these parameters. Now this button here archives fields. You can see here that these have numbers beside them. Each of these fields has a custom, is basically a column in a database with a value of 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. If you make one of these and then you archive it, we will then, if you create extra fields, start at number 4, because we don't want you to pass data under a certain column and then change its name and pass completely different data. If you do this, your reporting can get a bit weird because at some point in time, the data you were storing under that attribute or that field just completely changed. That's why if you decide you want to stop using something like pub and you don't want to pass this data anymore, you can archive it, but then when you add other fields, they start at higher number. You can add up to 20 fields, and that's the limit at the moment, but you shouldn't need more than that. Okay, as for conversion tracking, the most common type is generally a postback URL. Here you would put whatever URL your traffic source provides to you and configure the data you want to pass back. So you might have something like your traffic source URL and then some conversion parameter like click ID equals, and you might pass back the external token because you captured this click ID under this field here. Then you might add something like, and the payout equals payout. This is whatever the payout was for the conversion that happened. And you could pass transaction IDs, timestamps, as well as various attributes, which you can find here, or field tokens, which are all of these ones that were available here. You can also use general HTML, so you can put image pixels in here, or you could put script tags. That's really up to you. This is just client-side tracking code, so for example, Facebook pixel content. But if you want to use this, you will have to use our JavaScript conversion tracking for your offers. When our JavaScript conversion tracking fires, it will inject or piggyback this content here for that user onto the page in an iframe. You can't use a postback URL with your offer source or network or whatever it may be and expect to fire some client-side script or JavaScript for that conversion. You have to use our JavaScript to do that. There's simply no fundamental technological way around that. Now, for every traffic source that you've created, these will be available when you're generating links. So let's have a look at one of these that already exists. Let's say Taboola. I can see for Taboola, under tracking fields, I have a number of parameters here: publisher, ad, creative, and campaign. And I have no default cost set. Great. So if I go to a funnel and I want to generate a link, let's check out this funnel here. If I click this traffic node and I want to get an entrance link here, if I pick Taboola, you can see this link that was generated here using whatever domain I select. If I copy this and paste it into the address bar here, you can see these parameters, campaign, publisher, ad, and creative, are all appended to the URL. So the traffic source determines what data we add into this URL here after this query symbol. Everything else here is IDs for the funnel and the traffic source itself. I can also put a cost here, so let's put cost. And if I copy this, you can see now there's this additional parameter C equals cost in the URL. So that might be something like 0.01, or it might be some token that the traffic source allows. Now, for all of these traffic sources and these links you generate, just a reminder, you don't need to actually save these links. They're all dynamic. So if you come into a funnel and generate a link for, say, Google AdWords, and you get this URL, you don't need to save this. If you save these settings and you click back on it, you'll notice that everything is reset here, because these aren't something which you need to store in our system or save or the links stop working. They all just exist at all times. They're completely dynamic. So that might be different to other trackers where you're used to creating campaigns which have their own kind of static hard-coded link. You don't need to do that in FunnelFlux. You can generate links to send traffic from any source to any funnel at any time, or to any part of the funnel. For example, I can click here and I can actually send people directly to this condition node if I want to. All that happens is the link is slightly different, and it now has an additional node parameter here in it telling us to go here instead. Okay, so that's everything for traffic sources. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to support.